Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the U.S. Super Yacht Association's weekly educational series. My name is Kitty McGowan. I'm the president of the U.S. Super Yacht Association, and we have a fantastic program for you today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our vice chair of our association, Diane Byrne from megayachtnews.com, because she has been working so closely with our speakers today. I think you guys will be very excited about the program. Diane, take it away.
Our program today is called Defining Business Directions in Tough Times, 5 strategic options to come out on top. Our presenters, who I will introduce in a moment, are going to give you some really good tips to recalibrate your business for the long term, not just the short term. A lot of companies right now are focused on the short term survival, which is okay, but really we need to take a longer view. So without further ado, our presenters are David Braun, who is the founder and CEO of Capstone Strategic, and Edelweiss Harrison, who is the vice president at Capstone Strategic. So the company is a leading mergers and acquisitions consulting firm based in the DC area. David and Edelweiss are each also published authors and public speakers. They work across many different industries and serve clients in middle markets in North America, as well as in Europe and in Asia. David founded Capstone in 1995, and the firm has a particular area of expertise in assisting proactive acquisitions of closely held, not-for-sale businesses, and has completed over $1 billion in transactions. And on the personal side, both David and Edelweiss like to be out on the water whenever possible, and David is an avid fisherman. So David and Edelweiss, thank you so much for your time today. Please take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Diane. And Kitty, really appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to speak to our fellow members. Capstone's a proud member of the Super Yacht Association, recent member, and we appreciate this opportunity just to share some thoughts with you as we go forward and think through moving forward in this pandemic. Just briefly, I wanted to mention David and I are going to be team tagging on this conversation today, and we'll be sharing some of the thoughts. I do like highlighting the book. We'll be talking about a lot of different ways of moving forward. David wrote a book called Successful Acquisitions, which is one of the core ways that we help our clients move forward. And a lot of the content that we're covering today is discussed in further detail in this book if you're looking at further reading material. So to set the scene for our conversation, we wanted just to provide a little bit of perspective. The best kind of illustration that I've heard so far as we've been going through the pandemic and really focused on reactionary measures over the last few weeks in March, and then adjusting slowly over April, and now we're into May. This quote kind of really summarized it up for us as we think about the future: is the best response for navigating through the COVID-19 crisis and subsequent recovery will differ based on a company's circumstances. And for some, simply staying calm, carrying on, that's really going to be your best course. For others, you might need to do a radical revisiting of your business, your cost structures, and so on. And so you have the illustration I've heard that really sums it up is we're all in the same, going through the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And so depending on where your company is at, there will be different responses that are more appropriate than others. From a perspective point of view, Capstone, we really believe that it's critical to think about the future and to be proactive. There's a huge element of satisfaction, but also confidence that you gain by proactively thinking about what comes next, so that you're not just waiting to see what things happen to you. And so as business owners and business leaders, we really encourage that particular perspective. So what is our new normal? The last few weeks have been unprecedented, extraordinary, a lot of different ways of characterizing this pandemic and the impact it's had not only to us on a local level, but really on a global, international basis. And yachting, of course, is an international industry. So what is the new normal, right? We've had working conditions change. I was on a webinar earlier this morning talking about crew conditions and how folks that have been on boats, but also then the companies on shore, what a number of discussions in the past about working remotely, all of a sudden things that were debated were immediately enacted overnight. Demand, the 2019 for many companies was a record year, and the beginning of 2020 was looking very positive until this started to hit and lockdowns. And then there was overnight, there were companies that very quickly started budgeting and forecasting zero revenue just to figure out what was worst case scenario and what would they need to do. And obviously there are ranges in there. So quite a number of different variables that have impacted. And I think the uniqueness of this particular crisis, of course, is that it's not just one part of our lives, not just our businesses, but also personal lives as well. And so the flow-on effect of the health considerations across all areas have impacted in pretty unique ways. David, do you want to jump in there as well?
So thank you, Advice, and thank you again for the honor of being with all of you today. I think this is a good representation of the earlier slide that Advice shared. This is not a situation where it's going to be the same challenge or the same solution for everybody. And so one of the things that we're looking at is that we've got people all along the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, we're working with clients of ours that are seeing significant demand. And for them, one of the challenges is, how do I keep up with that demand? So I may have lots of orders, but I may not have the supply to be able to get products or people to show up to actually get the products produced. And on the other end, we've got clients that have zero revenue. And there's lots of things in between. And so part of it is just trying to have an awareness of some of the things that are going on, maybe not just in your own company, but kind of around you, because there are situations where there's going to be a requirement to invest more. Advice mentioned working conditions where, companies may actually have to get more space because they're going to have more, like think of a call center. They're going to have more division, or a restaurant, more physical distancing of folks. On the technology side, companies that maybe haven't invested in remote work technology or online ordering are going to see that that's going to really be a requirement for them in many cases. And then the last one that I would mention is the supply chain. And this is one, quite frankly, where we're seeing opportunities. And the situation is that many companies are saying, hey, I don't want just-in-time inventory anymore. And what we're seeing is what we call the resilient supply chain. So I want to make sure that I know I can get it from multiple sources. I want to make sure it's close. I may not want it to be produced in China anymore, or my customers may not want it to be produced in China. So that's an area where, in many cases, we're seeing some of the most significant opportunity for companies. But you can see there's kind of a wide range of things in terms of this new normal that are going to be going on. And so part of it is, how do we deal with that? And that's what we're going to move towards next, because I think one of the challenges that we at Capstone work really hard is, it's tough to listen to someone say, stay calm. So what do I do? I've got a business that is deteriorating. I've got an economy that I don't know if it's going to come back for my business. What is it that I do to stay calm, and what is it that I do to prepare for the post-pandemic? So a lot of what we're going to talk about today in our time together is going to be some tools so that you can actually go back to your organizations and start thinking about this and having some vocabulary to start having some conversations about what does my post-pandemic business start to look like. So let's continue on and jump right in, Advice.
All right. So in the spirit of embracing new technology, one of the tools that we've started using is Slido. So if you get your mobile device, pick it up, type in, go to slido.com, and you will find use the USSA code, and you will find our first poll question. And USSA is the code. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Annie can share hers. All right, so as you're sending in your responses, the top one there is obviously cash, and obviously ongoing, tied to that ongoing revenue uncertainty. So definitely things, but also shutdown of locations, being furloughed from a staff team perspective, the challenges of working from home, challenges of not having workers. And I know that especially in some areas of the marketplace, we had challenges around getting the right employer and worker base to start off with. So Annie, go ahead, you can end sharing your screen and I'll take it back. All right, so that's a tool that you guys can see about using in the future, slido.com. So the big picture perspective is that the one categorical statement that we feel comfortable making is that this isn't the end of yachting, right? As an industry, the industry will survive. It's obviously going to look different. It's been shaken up. And there are going to be some folks that don't make it to the end of the year, but there are plenty of opportunities to anticipate and work through over the coming months to see, to basically end up in a best case scenario given all the circumstances. In the spirit of perspective, we did want to also just remind you that companies have been started in recessions or even depressions. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have multiple companies that have been around for now generations and have started in difficult times and been able to weather them. On the right-hand side, you have the newer batch. All of those companies, Airbnb, Uber, WhatsApp, and so on, all of those were started right around the area of time of 2008. And they're having their first real set of trials this time around. So again, interesting to see to keep the perspective that companies are birthed and survive through difficult times as they go through. We promised to share a few take-home tools, and this is the first one that we'll be sending over to you after the webinar. We use this as a tool to kind of ground our thinking from a strategic perspective. In the center, you have 5 forces that effectively impact every business. And if you're familiar with Michael Porter, he's developed this model a number of years ago. And the idea is to systematically identify threats to your business and as well as identifying competitive risks. So your company exists right in the middle. You have your direct competitors that are contributing to the regular day-to-day challenges of offering similar products and services. Those are your direct competitors. You have your customers that exercise a particular level of influence over your business, and the number and variety of your customers will dictate to an extent the influence they have over your business. The suppliers, obviously you've got your raw materials, you've got your staff, and a number of different cost structures here in terms of the suppliers that contribute. And where there is demand, high demand and low supply for suppliers, then they also exercise a level of pressure on your business. As you're considering the future, the 2 other areas in terms of your environment to keep aware of, your immediate marketplace, are the threat of new entrants and the threat of substitutes. So for example, if you're in the business of making jet skis and a new competitor comes from overseas, that is an example of a threat of a new entrant. And if there are few barriers to entry, bringing their own product in, then that could be a more or less significant impact on your business. And the substitute is an example of that is what's the demand for, say, submarines or inflatable toys versus jet skis, if you're in the jet ski business. So those are the 5 circles are really examples of challenges and forces that impact your immediate marketplace. In recent years, we've started paying much more attention to the blue landscape. There is an acronym called PESTLE, and it stands for Political, Economic, Social, Technological, Environmental, and Legal. And the idea is to give you a really easy way of just checking and systematically looking through your landscape and saying, you may not be able to control these external forces, but what influence might they have on your business, and how should you be adapting as a result? So, for example, before this social crisis, the healthcare falls under social in this model. Before the social crisis, a lot of companies were actually planning for potential economic impact. We've had a really long run of upward swing in terms of the markets and economic strength. And it's natural for the markets to course correct over time. History has shown that they do that every 7 or 8 years roughly. This one was a longer run. And so a number of companies were aware of that and had been sort of asking the question, what do we need to do? Should we bolster up some reserves and so on? So the idea of the framework is to give you context and make sure that you don't have any blinders on as you're thinking about the future, that you consider what might be changing. We'll talk about some of these, how they might play out as we talk about the 5, the next levers. All right, so in the remaining time, most of our conversation is going to be just walking you through 5 levers that you can consider for your business. And these are examples in terms that depending on the sophistication of your business, you might regularly review these anyway. What we find is middle market companies don't always have the resources or are usually very focused on the day-to-day operations, and in this case, the crisis management. And so they're not stopping to think systematically about what are their options for the future. So the 5 levers that we call them are organic and external growth. External is sometimes called inorganic growth. You do also have options like exit the market, minimize costs, and do nothing, while always a point of contention as to whether that's a wise move or not. It is an option that sometimes is appropriate. So the first 2, the organic and external in particular, will have a lot of examples. So we'll go through them and talk through them. So again, David and I will team tag on these as we go through. So the first one is organic growth. And this is the set of tools and levers that companies are usually most familiar with. That's where you're talking about growing the number of customers, typical organic investments, right? You're exploring opportunities to add staff, to make new investments, whether that be in technology or new office space, new equipment, depending on what your business is. There's always a conversation around launching new products and services. The marketing initiatives, certainly that we've seen in the industry so far, have been heavily weighted towards boat shows and major events that the industry is holding. So those marketing initiatives would be typical of if you think about your plans going into 2020. Lobbying your legislators and so on. The ABC is a standard practice in educating legislators about the impact and the benefits of the recreational boating, so that you have favorable conditions, legal framework for the industry. And of course, the supply chain and questions about your inventory and so on. COVID obviously impacted all of these areas and more significantly. The fundamental question is, as you think through these, are whether these are temporary or long-term operating adjustments. So obviously at the beginning of March when the or in March when the lockdowns were being rolled out and there were severe concerns around the spread of the virus, there is a very strong element of protection and figuring out how to contain, right? So a lot of the operations were adjusted around containment, and then slowly is figuring out how the business. So customers around charters were there was a lot of uncertainty around that. So protecting, finding. Some companies did go through and readjust in the manufacturing space. They readjusted their production from boating equipment to PPE, as an example, or hand sanitizer and so on. Questions around that. So a lot of your workforce, if not all of your workforce, in many cases has gone remote. So the question now is there an opportunity to redeploy? Have you had to reduce staff? Do you need to go back and add staff? All of those things will be part of the thinking in terms of the survival decisions that have happened over the last few weeks, and then thinking through for each of these areas, what do we want to bring back into our business, acknowledging that there will be continued uncertainty at least throughout the rest of the year. How do we continue to calibrate the business as we go through? And David, did you want to touch on a couple of items here?
I'll just make a couple comments. One, for any of you that read the Wall Street Journal, yesterday was a particularly good day for talking about organic growth. So there's two examples here. One, I don't know if you can see the picture, but one is a picture of Lufthansa's airline. Can you see it there? Just a little bit. So they have repurposed a number of their aircraft to now carry cargo instead of passengers. Organic is going to be your best bet for many of you, for many of your companies. It's the lowest risk. It's the area that you know the most. What's going to scare a lot of people is the idea that I may actually have to spend capital to stay alive or to satisfy the growing demand that I have for my business. One of the things that we see that's different in this economic stress situation from previous ones is it's much more of a balance sheet situation than it is an income statement standpoint. So it's not just about cash flow, it's really about the balance sheet to be able to withstand the delays and the uncertainties, to be able to make the kind of investments. You know, if you have a restaurant business, for example, at a marina, you may need to invest to be able to provide a place for customers to sit appropriately spaced, or to be able to take online orders, or to have takeout capabilities, as the case may be. So in many cases, it's going to be a balance sheet challenge for companies, which is going to tie right into the next option for growth, because there may need to be some bridging there in terms of how we're going to work together to survive this. The other one that I'll mention on here that's also on the same section of the front page of the second section of yesterday's Wall Street Journal is Wendy's. So just a minute ago, I mentioned about the supply chain and the move away from just-in-time inventory to a resilient supply chain, because the supply chain, you know, normally we're very focused on the demand side. This is a situation where we have to be equally, if not more, focused for a number of industries on the supply side of things. So one example that maybe many of you can relate to is Wendy's. So Wendy's is in a situation where they're having to remove beef from their menu in many cases. And it's not necessarily because they don't have access to beef. It's that they don't have access to fresh beef, which is what they serve on their menu. So their supply side is really being challenged. And so for some of us, looking at how we're actually going to be able to procure what we need to be able to make a product to then sell to somebody may be a challenge for us. And it may be also a balance sheet stress because of the costs going up and the need to pay for things in advance in some cases, which has changed some of the credit markets. So this is probably the first area that we would look at in terms of looking for opportunities for companies that have no revenues to try to get revenues, and for everybody in between, all the way up to companies that have a lot of demand but are now trying to figure out how they're going to satisfy that demand. So this is going to be your first area, I think, for most of you to spend some time on.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so next lever is external growth, and I'm going to touch on just a few definitions as a starting point, because one of the things that we find interesting about external growth is it's often a forgotten alternative. Folks often think that it's only the big companies that are going to pursue these alternatives, but there's a lot of a scope for creative partnership. And so as you'll see, it's not just about 100% acquisition or not. There are a lot of different variations and opportunities. So let me just touch on a few as we go through. So joint ventures, the key here is equity. So it's two or more companies coming together to form a new company, and they might contribute assets, dollars, people, facilities, or brands. And the key definition is that there's equity involved. Sometimes it's a 50-50 split, but not always. We've also seen 80 and 10-10 as an example between three different parties. Strategic alliance is one of the ones that we often find people come into easily because it's non-equity based, but they don't always work particularly well for one reason. One particular reason in our experience is that they're often tailored or developed around a single common customer. So for example, maybe you have tier 2 or 3 suppliers that come together to serve a larger entity, like one of the larger shipyards. The challenge is that if you're combining various widgets to sell a system, the key here is dispute resolution. Who owns the customer? What happens if there's a challenge on price? If there's a question about warranty? Who's going to work with the customer to develop the new product? Who's going to be responsible for sales, and so on and so forth. So strategic alliances are a little looser because they don't involve equity, but by the same token, they can be problematic if you're focusing on the same customer. Now, in cases where we have seen them work well, are where a couple of companies come together to develop a system, but they're responsible for different customer sets. So for example, the system is sold to Asia and North America, and different parties are responsible for each of those areas. That's an example where there's clear ownership, and so it's much easier to resolve conflict or questions as they come up. Licensing agreements are pretty popular with tech companies, or with when technology is involved, and that's pretty straightforward. Toll manufacturing has been around for a long time, came out of the chemical industry, where basically you outsource your manufacturing for a fee. So that might be a private label or white labeling a product. The minority interest is one that we like to highlight because that's one that we think has a lot of opportunity. If you've got, say, $5 million to invest, putting all of that money into one other company is much riskier in many cases than making, say, 5 investments of $1 million. So part of it is there are a lot of ways that you can structure a deal so that you have influence and can influence the outcome or the direction of a particular organization without being the majority owner. Another reason why you might want the minority interest is if you're particularly interested in the leadership for the company that you're investing in, and you want them to stay, not only stay and work, but stay and be engaged, then ensuring that they have an ongoing financial interest is often a good way of aligning priorities as you go forward. Franchises are pretty straightforward. Import and export, obviously that is a particular area that is going through a lot of question marks right at the moment, of just figuring out how that's all going to play out in terms of any security and health concerns over time, but that's typically a distributor relationship. And acquisition, 100% acquisition would be through a stock deal or an asset deal, and you become owner of the other entity. A marketing agreement is an example where a couple of brands come together and basically co-brand. So United and Marriott coming together a few years ago, that's an example of a marketing agreement. And they did that. They're providing different products and services, but they're all looking to serve the same type of premium customer. So that's part of that can be a very attractive partnership. That could make sense in the yachting industry too. The IPOs are much less relevant today than they used to be about 20 years ago. There used to be much more of a cachet of being a public company, and it was a way to access markets, capital markets in particular. And convertible debt is an example of a type of investment that you can make if you're not sure that you want to own an entity. But you're willing to lend them capital as you learn more and build the relationships there and see how things work out. It gives you an option to convert your debt to equity down the road. So, David, any comments you wanted to add there in terms of this particular growth lever?
So this is an area where I think many of you can see under the first one, the option one of organic growth, you may see opportunities. This one may allow you to actually implement some of those opportunities. And so I'll just make two comments. One is, I think you can see that there's a wide range of tools available to you when you think about external growth. The second option or comment that I would make to you is, for many of you in this environment, it's going to be about how do we link ourselves to other people so that we're, in effect, linking arms to benefit each other in this environment. So we're working with trade associations like USSA to help facilitate a number of industry interactions where we can help companies to identify good partners that will benefit each other. And in many cases, the one that Edelweiss mentioned there about toll manufacturing, in our industry, another word that we use for that in this environment is called aggregation. So becoming an aggregator of products and services or capabilities. So allowing you to link with your other potential partners in this marketplace is one where we're seeing a lot of interest in terms of trying to be asset light and cash light, but still getting the benefits of working together. Think about simple things like, in some cases, purchasing products and being able to get some of the benefits of being a larger organization, but not necessarily having the legal infrastructure or web of working together. So I think there's a lot of different opportunities here. There's no one solution for everybody.
I'm just going to actually insert one question that we had from earlier is, let me read out the question. We had been thinking about acquiring or making investments in other companies before the crisis. If we reach out to companies now, won't they think we're trying to take advantage of them?
Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to?
Go for it.
All right. So that's an interesting question. I think one of the challenges is you can be perceived as being a bit of a vulture. There are a number of funds that have just been really exploding here in the past 6 or 8 weeks, where companies are coming together to buy debt, if you will, from other organizations to be able to control the businesses. I think you could be perceived as being a bit of a vulture. I think you can disarm that by acknowledging that at the beginning and saying, hey, I'm not contacting you because I felt like you were in a weaker position or in a different position because of the COVID-19 situation, I would have contacted you anyway. So regardless of what's going on currently, I would have contacted you anyway. And let me just add one other thing to that, because I think some people may have the impression that markets are kind of dead or quiet at the moment. And I will tell you, the markets are actually very active at the moment. And I'll just give you one anecdotal comment around that. In the past 10 days, we have probably negotiated 10 letters of intent. And they're a variety of different kinds, but and some are domestic and some are international. But the business, I'm not saying it's the same as it has been, but what I'm saying is it's not that business has stopped. And so I just wouldn't be bashful about thinking about knocking on someone's door if you think it still makes good sense strategically and financially to do business together. So that's how I would answer that question, Edelweiss.
Great. And I think the only other thing I would add is that from a philosophical perspective, we feel it's really important to be very clear about what you bring to the table in any deal. We believe every company is for sale for the right equation, and it's not just about cash. So you need to understand be able to paint a picture about the future of why it makes sense for you to be the investor that they would partner with. So when you have a clear story to tell about the value that you bring to their team, to the future, et cetera, to the customers, that strengthens your position quite a bit. All right, so I'm going to cover off our third take-home tool just quickly here. The opportunity matrix is one that can be used both for external and organic growth. It's one to keep in mind. At a simple level, it's the question you should be asking is, do we have an opportunity to consolidate, increase our market share? That's where you go deeper with your current customers and you're selling existing products. Do you have an opportunity for a market share growth there? And it can be through organic initiatives or external ones. Do you have an opportunity, or do you want to pursue an opportunity of distribution where you're taking your existing product line and taking it to a new customer set? That's one of your other strategic options. Going down to the breadth level, that's where you have your existing customer base, and that's the lane you want to stay in. But you see an opportunity, and given the circumstances and looking forward to actually offer new types of products or services. So that's adding breadth to your portfolio. And diversification is really typically the riskiest strategic option that you could pursue, where you're serving new customers, new products. I think a number of the companies that moved into manufacturing PPE from boating equipment, for example, would never have contemplated that in a non-crisis situation, right? It's just very risky. But in the crisis situation, you take greater risks. And so that's one of the considerations. So again, just another framework for you guys to use. I'm looking at the time, and I'm Brazilian, so I'm always conscious of not running too late. So here we go. The last three. Exit the market. Now, this one is always kind of interesting. A lot of people think, hang on, that's a negative thing. Do we really, is that really an opportunity that we should consider for the future? Our perspective is that in every situation, it's much better if you're doing the leading. So it should be part of your regular strategic plan to consider what your exit strategy is. As you evaluate your product and service portfolio, are there areas of your business that the resources that are being deployed there would be better deployed somewhere else? And so we use the term recalibrating your business quite regularly. One of the examples that we helped one of our clients, we say grow from 500 million in revenue to 250 million in revenue. And you're like, how is that growth? Well, their profitability significantly increased and they position themselves very well for the future because they weren't deploying so many resources in an area that didn't have long-term viability for them. So there are a lot of reasons why companies end up considering to exit the market, but we can tell you that making sure that you think about that in advance is you'll feel much better by being in the driver's seat. And I'll just circle the regulatory requirements. The webinar I was on this morning around crew and the process of actually confirming that crew are healthy and being able to transfer them from one city to another just got a lot more complicated. I can tell you that much. So again, is that something that's going to challenge your business in unsustainable ways down the road? Those are questions that you should be thinking about. It's better if you're in the driver's seat. Any other comments on this one, David?
Not everybody's going to make it. Not everybody's going to survive. I think we have to be honest about that. And one of the biggest things we try to do is help companies who don't look like they're going to survive or choose not to do an orderly wind down so that they're prepared and making the best. If we're going to pull the Band-Aid, let's pull the Band-Aid and let's be in control of that. I have been asked about valuation in the past, and right now there's a lot of questions about how to value companies. The only comment I would say is, even if your company has no revenues, that doesn't mean you do not have value. Because there are lots of things about your business that may still be valuable, and there may still be value to leverage. We're just today signing a merger agreement with one company that has very little revenues, but they have a lot of knowledge and people and brand and history and things like that. And we're looking at how do we now link that together and create something so that there's a higher likelihood that there's going to be something on the backside of this. So I just think that if you're in that situation, be honest about it, be in control of it.
Yep. Great, thank you. All right, so fourth one is minimize costs. And we sometimes call this the kind of jellyfish approach, because you're on the waves, and as the market goes up, you go up, and then as the market goes down, you go down. And the idea is that there are quite a few. I expect that most companies, if not all companies on this webinar, will have thought of, gone through, and that will have been a key lever that you looked at for, especially at the beginning of, as this crisis was hitting. Obviously, capital expenditure, looking at your real estate expenses, property, technology deployment, staffing and redeployment of team members, the energy, and obviously the compliance. We're taking a future-oriented look on this, right? So the question is, what about, you want to find a balance between minimizing costs so that you get to the future. At the same time, you don't want to cripple your business. So it is a delicate balance, because if you cut costs too far, especially in terms of personnel, you may have a very difficult recovery if you recover. So there's a balance there in terms of finding that what areas are again, hard decisions to make. I'll give just briefly an Airbnb example. They are actually, we've been following them a little bit, and in terms of their leadership decisions, they've been systematically looking through the 4 options that we've just talked about, and have done some very innovative course corrections and new product launches as a result of a very close engagement with their stakeholders, the homeowners and hosts, as well as customers that were staying at Airbnb. What's been interesting, of course, is that they've had to make the decision to lay off 25% of their workforce. That was just announced this week. And what I was very interested about is just that they didn't just say, okay, it's it wasn't a trivial decision. Obviously, it's a very material decision. What they did was they went through and talked about their future. They looked through, say, okay, based on what we see in the travel industry happening in the next 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years, we don't see these areas. So for example, they reduced their investment in hotels, in luxury products. They recalibrated to focus more on the original individual homeowners that they were actually working with. So again, minimizing cost in a strategic manner means that you're thinking through the big picture of what it is that you're trying to achieve beyond just survival of the crises. So, anything else, David? Good on
In
that?
one word, technology.
Yep.
I would expect there's going to be a lot of investment in technology, regardless of where you are positioned in the industry.
Yeah, we could spend a whole conversation just on technology. All right, so the last one is do nothing, and that one is always a fascinating one because history is full of examples where some companies did do nothing for too long. They eventually responded. In some ways, I almost think of it as it's a stunned, you know, if you're so overwhelmed by a crisis that or a new development like an iPhone, in the case of BlackBerry, where your thinking just takes too long or takes a long time to get off the do nothing bucket. So those are multiple examples of where it's easy contrast, right, of companies that did nothing for quite some time. Berkshire Hathaway is there because occasionally in the past, Warren Buffett has made very interesting, calm investment strategies. And this goes back to our very first quote of, for some companies, staying calm and carrying on is the optimal solution. In this crisis, we suspect that there are going to be very, very few companies where that's truly the case. But it's the point being that, again, it's be intentional about it. Don't do nothing by default. If you're going to do nothing for a particular division, for a particular product line, be very clear about why you're doing it and when you're going to revisit that strategy. David?
No, I think that's good. I think for some of us, there are at least parts of our business that we have to just say we're going to hold tight, and the other parts of our business that we have to do something. So it's to your point, Edelweiss, it's about being intentional about what we're doing. I think some people are feeling a little bit paralyzed because they don't know what to do, and so as a result, they're doing nothing. And why does that concern us? Is because there is so much dramatic change going on in everyone's industry. And one of the things that is unique about this environment is you have the social license to make changes. And probably the number one change that we see happening across the board is reduction in workforce. Companies have found that it's amazing how they've been able to get along without some of the people not being able to work. So in some cases, it's that they found out that they had maybe more people than they needed, and they've been carrying people intentionally or unintentionally. But probably one of the number one things is around reduction in workforce. And you have the social license to do that because it's somewhat expected. You also have the social license to change your business model. And so I will just tell you that every element of the economy and businesses are being stressed. And so there's new alliances, there's new positioning going on. And so part of it is if you do nothing, just make sure we're being intentional about it. And I would just encourage you to be aware of kind of the things that are going on around you. And that pestle tool, I think that Edelweiss talked about at the beginning, is a good way to have a snapshot for how do I think about that.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. All right, so then just to recap, these are the 3 tools we'll be sending over to you. The forces affecting your business, both in your immediate competitive space as well as the pestle, the external ones. You've got the trigger, just a checklist there of the 4 broad categories of options that you have for moving forward. And then the opportunity matrix says you consider different potential strategic directions that you're going through. So some companies will have a pretty sophisticated assessment of these, and others will be pursuing multiple strategies simultaneously. Others will do them in parallel because of the resource capability that they have. All right, so let's wrap up with our last poll question. So you can go back in, and I will back into slido.com, and our code is USSA. And the poll question this time is, Annie will share that with us again. And the poll question this time is, what is your greatest opportunity post-pandemic? So you can shoot that question over to them. What's your greatest opportunity post-pandemic? And again, if you look at perfect, yeah, to a couple of words there popping up already: digital transformation, strategic alliance, new markets. New markets, cool. Web traffic, PPP, yeah. Great. Give people a couple more seconds there to answer. So, new markets and digital transformation, a couple of the top opportunities there. And then repositioning self in industry, marketing, online sales. Incidentally, some folks that we spoke to in the industry have part of their coping mechanism over the last few weeks has been to put their product line on their website and take the advantage to really refresh that. All right, I will go back to. So as we wrap up then, this is a photo from the Monaco Yacht Show, which I understand at the moment is still scheduled. If you have any questions for us, growth@capstonestrategic.com. Obviously open, we're happy to take any questions now. If you want to from the group, not sure if anyone else has sent in comments. I have one more from earlier, and then if anyone else wants to send questions afterwards, you can as well to us. We're happy to chat. So one of our suppliers, here's the question. One of our suppliers approached us to ask whether we'd be interested in buying them. How do we know whether that's a good idea or not?
Edelweiss, why don't you answer that one?
So the starting point is really about what's your strategy. So it needs to come back to take a step back. We are in Diane's introduction, she mentioned that we focused on specialize in not for sale opportunities. The reason we do that is because we focus on strategic fit. So whether an opportunity is a good opportunity for you or not depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve with your business. So oftentimes when somebody comes up for sale, the conversation jumps very, very quickly to finances. Well, it depends on the price and so on. We would suggest that that's probably not the best starting point for the conversation. You want to take a step back and say, hang on, what is it that we're trying to achieve as a company, and what opportunities would this, in this case, a supplier, provide for us that we can't do on our own, or that we can't do in a different way. And so it's taking a step back and thinking about it from a big picture strategic perspective. That's the preliminary lens through which to be able to evaluate. And in some cases, for some companies, we encourage them to be systematic about outlining what kind of criteria. Be very detailed in terms of what's actually a good fit for you: company, culture, geography, etc., finances, and so on. Any other comments, David?
No, I think you nailed it. I think it's about whether or not it's a good opportunity, and what do you gain by having control of that. as I started at the beginning, said in the middle, and I'll say here towards the end, the supply chain side of it is becoming much more critical. And that may be where that question came from, because maybe it's a critical supply component. And so we are definitely seeing interest in companies backwardly integrating to have control over their supply channel of key components for their business. So I think that's what you have to ask yourself, is this a critical component, or is this a commodity that maybe I don't necessarily care about investing in? Do I think it would be worthwhile to make my business better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So one last thing before I hand it back to Diane and Kitty. As part of our efforts to support folks during the crises, we've made our M&AU certification program available on a on-demand basis, on a complimentary basis. So if you're interested in any of the topics that we covered, or in any of those, you can go on our website, capstonestrategic.com. These are available to folks for the coming period. They're also on a complimentary basis. So that's something that we've done to support at-home learning as well. So with that, thank you so much. Back to you, Kitty.
Well, thank you so much, Edelweiss and David. What a really interesting program, and I'm so glad. And just so anybody that's still here, we have recorded this, and we will be putting it up. It will be available on our YouTube channel and through our website links. So that, because there's so much data, and it's like it takes a little bit to digest it all, and it's like, wow. I mean, you guys it really gave me a lot to think about our industry, and I thank you so very much for such a very in-depth and precise program, to be able to give us this much to walk away with, lots to chew on for sure. And again, everybody, make sure you go to their website at Capstone, the Growth Engineers. And thank you guys again. And you guys are tremendous supporters of our industry, capstonestrategic.com. And definitely take advantage of this opportunity here, because normally this would be not available on a complimentary basis. And it's a great idea for those companies. And there's so many of our companies. We're seeing a lot of vertical integration in many different sectors of our industry that you guys are talking about. Now's the time to kind of look at ways that you can grow through these kind of crisis times. And like I said, certainly lots of food for thought. And I look forward to watching the recording of this, so I can kind of now think about it and come back and digest even more. So thank you all so very much. We really appreciate you being here today, and we'll look forward to having more people reach out to you guys on an individual basis. So thank you very much. And for the people that are still here, next Thursday, our educational program does continue. With next week is our marketing and communication during changeable times. Now is the chance to pivot purposefully. As I say regularly, I say that 5 times fast, and you get a lollipop for that one, because that one's not an easy one. And we have another series of several weeks in the works right now that we'll be launching here right away. So stay tuned. We're here at the U.S. Super Yacht Association, again, with our mission to be the voice for the super yacht industry here in the United States and globally. And we can't do it without all of you here on the call with us. So make sure you spread the word to your friends and neighbors. And again, thanks so much to our speakers, Edelweiss Harrison and David Braun today, and Diane Byrne, and our wonderful team on the Education Committee that are working to bring tremendous value to your membership here at the U.S. Super Yacht Association. And during that, if there's nothing else, Diane, did you have anything further to add?
No, just Edelweiss and David, thank you. Really, this was terrific today. I definitely was jotting some pretty furious notes while you were talking, so I can tell you definitely gave me some good food for thought. And as far as everybody else is concerned, I see the comments popping up here, so a lot of people definitely have a lot that they're now able to take back and really consider. So thanks so much for your tremendous input and your support.
Yes.
And it's great that now we have some people that have a little bit more time Although not, some people are even busier than ever, like you guys clearly are just not stopping and taking a pause in this crazy pandemic world. So thanks again to everybody. We'll see you guys again here, same time, same bat channel next Thursday, 11:30 a.m. here at the U.S. Super Yacht Association. Thanks again. Stay safe, stay well, and we appreciate your support. Take care now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.